This is Sarah, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Noodle's current growth spurt that he's undergoing. So in addition to all of this TensorFlow, machine learning, AI, image recognition stuff that we've been working on all summer, I've also upgraded some of Noodle's oldest parts that have just, I don't know, they've gone unnoticed since he was born. So I'll actually grab it. Here. This is Noodle's original pelvis and skull. Yeah, and I just bit the bullet and redesigned these parts in Fusion and added all of the necessary reinforcements, I guess, and reprinted everything in a nice silver filament. So this is two pieces. This is his skull, which is the tray on top that holds his eyes, and his pelvis, which is this little box that captures the bearings for his hip bones and holds his motors that do the twisting of his femurs within his hips. So it's effectively, again, his pelvis and his skull. And then this is kind of, I guess, technically his neck. That's weird, isn't it? So for this whole process to take place, I had to literally take Noodle apart more than he's ever been taken apart before. I unshucked his legs from his pelvis. Those were strewn about. I had to unmount his skull from his pelvis, and then his eye gantry came out of his skull, and his brains came out of his skull, and there's just pieces of NoodleFeet literally all over the lab on different tables, depending on what was being worked on where. One of the first things that I fixed with his pelvis is the capturability of the bearings. He has these skateboard bearings in his hips, 4 on top and 4 on bottom, to make sure that the femurs stay registered nice and straight within the hip socket and don't torque at weird angles or anything. So over the past 3 years that I've been taking Noodle to exotic locations, they started coming out in my luggage. So one of the fun things I had to do in Tokyo when I was there is open up my suitcase and throw all of my clothes on the bed and then locate all of his hip bearings so I could pop them back in. That's not going to happen ever again, because there's a nice little cap that goes on top of this and it holds everything in place. So everything's contained. It's like a little box. The other thing that was absolutely terrible was this thing poking up right here, and this is actually his brain mount. His brain screwed into these holes from the front, so anytime I wanted to do anything particular, I had to actually get a screwdriver and unscrew his brain from these little pegs just to kind of pull it up enough that I could unplug things. So the way I redesigned it is so that the brain is attached to kind of a universal, like, plate, and then that plate just drops into a pair of slots, and I can just slide that in and out all day long. It makes my life easier. The last thing that I upgraded that was absolutely necessary for this exhibition that I'm having in 2 weeks is adding an additional eye stalk for his seeing eye. The actual functioning eye, the camera, had no place to really go, and I ended up getting gaff tape and just sort of gaffing it in place. So there's this wall of tape pushing everything together, but it wasn't mounted to anything properly. So I made an actual bracket for his new seeing eye, which is a USB camera that has mounting holes on the circuit board. It's held at the perfect distance in between his eyes, and it's just solidly in there now. In addition to that, he has 2 emoting eyes, which are the things that you look into to establish that Noodle has a soul. I was using some of our RGB LEDs. They were very generic. The color quality wasn't that great, so I went ahead and took some NeoPixel RGB LEDs. I still had to adapt these LEDs to the footprint of the old LED board, so I had to effectively take that tiny little PCB and then stick it to a larger square cracker and then jam that back into Noodle's eye. But when everything's said and done, they're a lot brighter and the color is a lot more rich, so it works. So very quickly thereafter, I did put him back together because it just felt weird to have him like that vulnerable. So yeah, in 2 weeks, I will be in Linz for the Ars Electronica Festival, and Noodle will be there all bright and happy with bells on, because he's all about him, really. And if you happen to find yourself in the area, I don't know, maybe we'll bump into each other and we can talk about robots and AI and, I don't know, good sausage and beer, because that's what I'm going to be having as soon as I get off the plane. As always, thank you for watching and keep making awesome stuff out there.